Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you kindly for stopping by. I'm always grateful for that. Have a look at this clip that we've posted now of the central bank governor, this specific piece when he was speaking about the banking issues here in Kenya. He covered Dubai Bank, Imperial Bank and Chase Bank, and it gives you an insight into the way he's thinking. My macro thoughts go to Holger's comment, markets are running on oil, global stocks have gained $8 trillion in market cap since February, when WTI hit a multi-year low. Home thoughts, T.S.Eliot, sometimes things become possible if we want them bad enough. And then April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. I like this photograph, which is a print of Sunbaker, taken by the modernist photographer Max Dupain. And it's being auctioned by Mosgreen on 19th June, is larger than most and is expected to attract considerable interest. I like this photograph, 10 nights in South Luangwa, Lower Zambezi, in an extraordinary Zambia safari. I certainly looked at. All obsessions are extreme metaphors waiting to be born. I have tried to take another remote control image, but nothing in content or composition touches this photograph. It's of elephants by David Yarrow. What about my photographs of elephants on the 1st of September 2013 in the Amboseli? And you get a great idea of the size of an elephant from the angle that I managed to take the photograph. Then I came across a piece in the New Statesman, The Downfall of Yang Fenglan, the Ivory Queen. Late last year, a car chase through the streets of Dar es Salaam ended outside a blue Art Deco hotel when police officers rammed their car into another belonging to their suspect, a small, bespectacled Chinese woman in her mid-60s. On the face of it, Yang Fenglan, a Swahili and Mandarin-speaking restaurant owner and a pillar of the Chinese business community in Tanzania, seemed an unlikely target for an undercover operation that had involved multiple security agencies. Days later, she appeared in court, charged with attempting to smuggle more than 700 elephant tusks, with a combined weight of nearly 1.9 tons and a market value of over 1.4 million pounds. He speaks of others who have been in Africa for a long time, embedded in a community, and have moved from legal activities to aggressively pursuing the ivory trade. Yang first came to Tanzania in 1975. Across Africa, more than 30,000 elephants are killed every year. It's frightful. Tanzania's elephant population fell by 60% in the 5 years through 2014. Impunity isn't what it was, says one person familiar with the case, who warns this trial could be embarrassing for the CCM and for China. It's a house of cards. Then a very interesting essay I came across in the New York Review of Books, The Depths of the Digital New Age. Every technological revolution coincides with changes in what it means to be a human being, the kinds of psychological borders that divide the inner life from the world outside. Those changes in sensibility and consciousness never correspond exactly with changes in technology. And many aspects of today's digital world were already taking shape before the age of the personal computer and the smartphone. But the digital revolution suddenly increased the rate and scale of change in almost almost everyone's lives. In The Changing Nature of Man, 1956, the Dutch psychiatrist J.H. van den Berg described 4 centuries of Western life, from Montaigne to Freud, as a long inward journey. The inner meanings of thought and actions became increasingly significant, while many outward acts became understood as symptoms of inner neuroses, rooted in everyone's distant childhood past. A cigar was no longer merely a cigar. A half-century later, at the start of the digital era in the late 20th century, these changes reversed direction, and life became increasingly public, open, external, immediate, and exposed. The explicit common theme of these books is the newly public world in which practically everyone's lives are newly accessible and offered for display. The less explicit theme is a newly pervasive, permeable, and transient sense of self, in which much of the experience, feeling, and emotion that used to exist within the confines of the self in intimate relations and intangible, unchanging objects, what William James called the material self, has migrated to the phone, to the digital cloud, and to the shape-shifting judgments of the crowd. When the smartphone brings messages, alerts, and notifications that invite instant responses and induces anxiety if those messages fail to arrive, everyone's sense of time changes. Attention that used to be focused more or less distantly on, say, tomorrow's mail is concentrated in the present moment. In Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, an engineer named Kurt enunciates a law of human existence. Personal density is directly proportional to temporal bandwidth. Temporal bandwidth is the width of your presence, your now. The more you dwell in the past and the future, the thicker your bandwidth, the more solid your persona, but the narrower your sense of now, the more tenuous you are. Digital connectedness, she concludes, is illusory. We're all more alone than ever, death itself glimpsed through a fathomless and godlike medium that doesn't suffer, is more harrowing than ever. Final point, yesterday I was up a little bit late. I normally go to bed by about 10. I was looking at a few things. I was up till 11. At 11, the puppy, well, they're no longer puppies, the dog started barking, and running over to my bedroom and sort of calling me. And eventually I got up and went to have a look. And Bruno, who's the biggest of the male dogs, had got his head stuck. He pushed his head through a grill and got it stuck round his neck. When I got to him, he was hyperventilating and panicking, and I just had to stroke him. Couldn't get him out. It took us about 30 minutes. But it was like dealing with a child. Political Reflections, 2016, Global Peace Index, Vision of Humanity. The 2016 Global Peace Index shows the world became less peaceful in the last year, reinforcing the underlying trend of declining peace over the last decade. Results also show a growing global inequality in peace, with the most peaceful countries continuing to improve, while the least peaceful are falling into greater violence and conflict. While the world became less peaceful in 2015, many countries also improved. In fact, slightly more countries improved, 81, than deteriorated, 79. As the size of the deteriorations was larger than the improvements, there was a decline in the global average. Terrorism is also at an all-time high. Battle deaths from conflict are at a 25-year high, and the number of refugees and displaced people are at a level not seen in 60 years. Pretty awful picture that they're painting. The economic impact of violence on the global economy in 2015 was $13.6 trillion in purchasing power parity terms. The figure represents 13.3% of the world's economic activity. Put up a chart that Holger tweeted, the Global Peace Index map of the world. Records a historically less peaceful and more unequal world. International markets, world government bond yields hit a record low of 0.7539% according to Citibank. Let's move on to the currency markets. The euro just shy of 114, 113.86. Dollar index 93.55. Remember, you've got to keep an eye on 93. Japanese yen firm 106.33. Swissy 0.9585. The pound 144.54, so it's down. You remember that fat finger day a couple of days ago got to about 146.60. The Aussie 0.7452. India rupee 66.675. South Korean won 1155.55, but I think they cut rates there. The real, look at that, 336.07. Remember, it was hanging around the 350 level. Egyptian pound 887.93. And the South African rand, when I checked last, about 14.78. I think that's a big sell. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart, might well go back and test 93. We're going to have to see how it behaves. The New Zealand dollar jumped to a 12-month high above 71 cents. It's now at 71.28. They left the benchmark interest rate unchanged for a second straight meeting. Have a look at the chart, which shows you what a stupendous rally the Kiwi posted. I like this photograph of De Rotterdam in the Netherlands. These famous interconnecting towers are seen as a vertical city, complete with housing, offices, shops, restaurants. Commodity markets, gold, last trading around the 1260 level. Soros and Druckenmiller are announcing that they've been buying. Quite often they're doing the very opposite, I've learned, but I think in this case they are buying. Javier Blas, very strong end of session for oil. Brent was trading up more than 2% and more than $52, $52.52. It's really gotten overcooked and basically squeezed all the shorts. Sub-Saharan Africa. Came across an essay in Al Jazeera by Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Africa's friend, compatriot and partner, it's called. As a sign of our faith in Africa, Turkish Airlines took a bold decision to enter the African market and quickly expanded its network to 48 destinations in 32 countries. Since 2000, Turkey's trade with Sub-Saharan Africa grew 8-fold to reach $6 billion. Number of Turkish embassies across the continent reached 34, a 5-fold increase. Turkey's cooperation with Africa is unlimited diplomacy and trade. Either in the international arena, we are committed to furthering the interests of African nations. One of my favorite African proverbs goes, true poverty is the lack of friends. Today and forever, Turkey will be a friend, a compatriot, and a partner of Africa. He's also quoted as saying, Turkey has no history of colonialism in Africa, what it does in the Middle East. It's strange, really strange, Gureva said. The dollar has an exchange rate against the dollar. How is that possible? I think it's another Zimbabwe first. In Zimbabwe, the country that once suffered 500 billion% inflation, $1 may now cost you as much as $1.07. A shortage of banknotes is resulting in a new black market more than 7 years after Zimbabwe abolished its own money, the Zimbabwean dollar, and adopted the greenback and other foreign currencies to avoid exactly that sort of unofficial trading. The cash crunch has intensified in recent weeks, according to Central Bank Governor John Mangudya, forcing banks to limit withdrawals and shut down some ATMs. Secondary school pupils in Burundi who were arrested for scribbling on pictures of the president have been charged with insulting the head of state. Put the economy in South Africa before yourself. Gordon urges. Jacob Zuma, no doubt. GDP for Q1 was down by an annualized 1.2% in South Africa, and I said this in February when I said South Africa, which is the second biggest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, will also contract, albeit 0% GDP this year. South African all-share up 6.44% this year. Dollar versus Rand 14.77. I think the Rand is a sell. Egyptian EGX 30 up 11.05% this year at a 6-week closing high. Nigerian all-share down 5.39% so far this year. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 11.78% this year. Mozambique, the yields on the Eurobonds, which mature in January 2023, fell 14 basis points to 17.26% after closing at a record high on Tuesday. They're still the highest yielding sovereign dollar bonds after Venezuela. The Southeastern African nation confirmed Wednesday that state-owned Mozambique Asset Management, or MAM, had defaulted on a $178 million interest payment on a $535 million loan from VTB Bank. I'll put up a photograph of the old central bank of Mozambique that I took a little while ago, and then of the sunset in Maputo harbour. Mozambique tells VTB not to rely on state for loan payment. MTN cuts jobs, scratch cards in bid to survive South Sudan crisis. The IMF projected last year that South Sudan's economy would contract 5.3%. Inflation has surged to 266%, the highest official rate in the world. Albinos in Malawi are being killed for their bones. People with albinism, for their part, live in fear. Many do not go out at night and are wary about whom they meet. In January, 2 women offered Miss Fury 1 million kwacha for Esther so they could extract the gold they believed was in her bones. DR Congo opposition leader ready for dialogue with the government. This is the veteran Democratic Republic of Congo opposition leader Etienne Tshisekedi. Said he was ready for dialogue with Kabila under international oversight as he called for unity against the government. DRC opposition figures began a 2-day meeting in Belgium to thrash out a common position against Kabila, who is widely believed to want a third term. Tshisekedi, who's 83, told them they were gathered as patriots to exchange views on the grave crisis affecting our country. More than ever, we must be united to get rid of you-know-who, he said, referring to Kabila. At the same time, the opposition must be mindful of the possible dangers and get the president to leave quietly, not expose the people to bullets. Katumbi, who has announced his candidacy for the presidency, had been expected to attend, but sent his closest advisors instead. Katumbi quit the DRC in May, ostensibly for medical treatment, and is now staying in Britain. He left the country a day after the government announced he would be tried for endangering state security. And I was talking about the battle for the street, you remember, and I said one way of dealing with it is to get rid of your opponent, which is what I think Kabila's done. Henry Rotich delivered the Kenya budget yesterday. Lots of interesting micro points, I thought. He's raised the tax on fuel by a big amount. That's probably going to get him 23.4 billion in new funds to maintain and repair roads. But I'll have a look at it over the next few days and then come back. Safaricom surged to its highest closing level ever yesterday, which was 1790. It's up 9.815% this year. Have a look at the interview I did with Bob after his full year results, the markets are the message. Centum surged 8.54% yesterday after releasing its full year earnings. We spoke about those yesterday. KenGen's rights issue closes tomorrow. Have a look at the rights issue timetable if you're interested. Kenya shilling, one of the least volatile currencies in the world right now. It's at 101. Nairobi all share minus 0.196% this year. but has closed at the highest level in June. NSE 20 down 6% so far this year. Once again, thank you for stopping by. I'm grateful.